Hi guys, my name is Isa. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about having difficult conversations with the person that you love. Let's get started. This is part of my intentional dating series, so if that is something that you're interested in, make sure to check it out. I will say I find this extremely beneficial, not only for your romantic relationships, but just any dynamic where you want to grow closer with that person. These are the conversations that you should have with your partner or your friend. If one of you said something that wasn't nice, did something that wasn't nice, or said and did something that was misinterpreted by the other person. So basically, these are the kind of conversations where someone opens up about something that they didn't like, perhaps a boundary that was crossed. They open up about how they've been feeling, maybe about a disconnect. And if you don't handle these conversations with love, patience, and respect, you can end up hurting the person that you love and potentially ruin the dynamic depending on how bad was a conversation handled from either or both of you. I just recently had a conversation like this with my best friend, which is what inspired me into writing this journal entry to have just a deeper understanding of the concept in itself, but also recording this episode. So I will be sharing the example so you can have a better understanding of why is it important and what could happen if you don't carry yourself a certain way. So what happened? I'm not gonna give that many details just because I don't think they're relevant to the story, but basically there was some miscommunication on what she was gonna do and what I was going to do, and we both had a different understanding of what was happening. So I later sent a text just kind of like explaining how I felt, but because I sent it on a text message, my best friend thought that I was angry at her, and she thought that I was blaming her and that I was pointing my finger at her. And obviously she started feeling a certain way, she started answering a certain way because in her mind I was treating her a certain way. I immediately caught it because I've had these conversations like 1,000 times. Although right now I am someone who knows how to have those conversations in person, I used to be someone who could not for the life of me have a conversation where I would open up about my feelings, about how I was hurt in person. I didn't feel comfortable showing my face. I didn't feel comfortable with like people hearing my voice because I would be so upset that my voice would crack, and I just felt more comfortable through text because it wasn't really personal. There's a lot of miscommunication through text because you can't hear someone's tone, you can't see their face, so you imagine the tone, you imagine the intention behind a text message. And that caused me so many more conversations because then we would have to discuss the actual problem and then how the conversation was handled through text. So it was like twice the emotions, twice the apologies, twice the validation. It was just emotionally overwhelming. So anyway, I caught it immediately that there was some miscommunication going on. So I was like, let me send you a voice note so you know exactly what tone I am using when I'm sending that message. And let me just clarify that like I'm not blaming you, right? So we ended up having a conversation and we ended up explaining that miscommunication. It was one of like the most respectful conversations I've ever had. Truly, after having so many like messy emotional conversations, it's so weird being able to have such a respectful conversation with someone. As I was explaining my side, for a brief moment, I thought these conversations can go south. Even though I don't want it to go south, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't want it to go south, this conversation can become so messy and could potentially be the end of a friendship or cause us to kind of like distance ourselves if either of us or both of us don't have the right intention in this conversation. And that is my first point. What is your intention when you have a disagreement or when you're clearing out a miscommunication? Do you want to prove the other person wrong, or do you want to understand where the other person is coming from? Understand their intention, understand their actions, their context, their reasoning. So for example, if my best friend's intention had been being right instead of like understanding me, the conversation wouldn't get past her feeling blamed. Even if I explained myself, she would just keep going back to her feeling blamed. If my intention was to win or prove her wrong, I would be like, that's not what I meant and that's not what I said and that's what matters. Can you notice how when both of us are trying to prove ourselves right and prove the other person wrong, we are invalidating each other's feelings, we're invalidating each other's experiences, and the conversation isn't really progressing. The conversation is so focused on one specific detail that you can't really get past it, and a lot of people get stuck on that. And that's why many people say you can either be right or be happy. And I want you to think about the concept of winning an argument. Wanting to win a disagreement with your partner, with your friend? What do you mean? I am talking with the person that I love, the person that I will potentially marry, or the person that I have so many plans with. And my focus isn't to make them feel heard, but rather invalidate their experience because I am right and they are wrong. I wouldn't care if the other person feels a certain way. I wouldn't care if the other person had like a whole different context or story based on their perspective or whatever. I wouldn't care about anything about them because I'm so focused on being right. And if I push and push and push my perspective and what I think and what is the truth for me, the other person will start building resentment towards me. I'm invalidating their experience, I'm invalidating their feelings. I am not allowing them to speak up their mind. I'm too focused on me, myself, and I am too focused on winning an argument. And next thing I know, this person won't be opening up to me. This person won't be trying to explain how they feel or how they view things because they already know I don't care about that. I only care about winning an argument. When you have those kind of conversations, it's not you against the other person. It's both of you as a team trying to understand where the miscommunication happened or what went wrong. Why would I become an enemy to my best friend while we have that conversation? Because that's not how it works. You don't get to be best friends and then become enemies for an hour and then best friends again. No. Having those conversations would be 10 times easier if we just remain best friends the whole time. Same with dating. What do you mean? This is the love of my life, but then when I'm mad because he said something, I just immediately focus on what he did wrong and what I did right and how I never fail. And then while we have that disagreement, I'm not showing him love. I'm not seeing him with love either. Like, I'm just too focused on that. And then I'm supposed to feel love with him again? Maybe I can feel love, but would my partner feel love for me if that's how I handle that conversation? I don't think so. When I look back, I don't remember an instance where I had trouble acknowledging where I was wrong. I'm not saying that I didn't because I am sure that I did. I really struggled with communicating in the past few years. But as of lately, like I want to say like in the past 2-3 years, I don't really remember specific moments where I struggled with acknowledging someone else's perspective. And I think that's because when I started my healing journey, I just became very in tune with my emotions. I became very self-aware and my emotional intelligence grew like so much to the point where I understand how bad, or not necessarily how bad, but how much I want to be validated in those specific moments. And I can also understand that the other person also wants to be validated. So I think as of recently, I didn't really struggle to acknowledge someone else's perspective, but I have encountered people who did struggle to acknowledge my perspective because they felt like it would mean something negative about them. Let's use this example with my best friend. It's as if me acknowledging that my best friend felt blamed would be me accepting the identity that I would need to have in order for that to be true. So basically, you feel like acknowledging how someone feels is immediately accepting the version that they see you as. And sometimes that version isn't always positive, especially if they feel hurt by something you did or said. I'm here to tell you that that is not true. That is not what happens when you acknowledge someone's perspective. Something that I learned as I was having these conversations and these miscommunications, they're very frequent. I don't think it's because I'm incompatible with the person. I feel like the closer you get with someone, the more miscommunication you guys are going to have just because you guys are sharing so much information of each other. You guys are sharing more time with each other than you would with other people. So obviously there are more opportunities for miscommunication and misunderstandings. So what I've learned is two things can coexist. In this case, my best friend can feel like she was being blamed, and at the same time, that wasn't my intention. Two things can be true. You know why? Because this is her perspective, and this is my perspective. What we see, what we experience, and what is our context is our truth. So, for example, if you think of yourself as someone who's not lovable and you think nobody loves you, you will live life as if nobody loves you, even if there's people who love you. Why? Because that is what you're seeing, that's what you're believing, that's what you're telling yourself, right? Two things can coexist, and it's not about what is the truth because both of them are true, depending on who you ask. So when you have those conversations, the goal shouldn't be what is the truth, but rather what is your perspective? Because when you understand someone's perspective, you understand why they said what they said, why they acted the way that they acted. For example, if someone gets defensive and you ask them, why are you so defensive? Well, you probably shouldn't ask them why they're so defensive, but if you have like a better understanding of how things played out in their mind, you're going to see that they felt attacked. And because they felt attacked, they started defending themselves. They started becoming defensive because that's them protecting themselves. So if you ask that person, I was being attacked, I defended myself, there's nothing wrong with how they handled the situation. But then you ask the other person and you're like, I was trying to have a conversation with someone and they were becoming like very defensive. Like they're just someone that you cannot talk with. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And that's what happens with most miscommunications. Both people or like everyone who's involved has a different perspective. So if you ask each person what they think, everything they did is aligned to what they think and they're on the right. It's so useless to try to prove yourself right and prove the other person wrong, because if there's a miscommunication, then both of you are wrong and both of you are right. So how should we handle this kind of situation? First off, you have to understand the other person's perspective. Understanding their perspective and acknowledging how it was for them does not mean that you are a certain way or that your version wasn't valid. It just means that that is what they experienced. Why wouldn't you want to understand someone's perspective if it's someone that you love? Why wouldn't you make the effort? Think about it. In order for you to understand this person, not only do you have to make the effort of understanding them and listening, but this person has to make the effort and the risk, because it is a risk, to open up about how they feel, about how they perceive the situation. And that is not always fun. Do you think it's fun admitting you said something and I feel hurt because it made me feel like you don't care about me? It made me feel like I care more about the relationship. It made me feel like I wasn't important. It takes so much courage to open up and share to the person you feel like hurt you. Why wouldn't you want to acknowledge that? I just don't understand. Like, why wouldn't you want to acknowledge someone else's experience, especially if it's someone that you care about? So you have to acknowledge the partner's experience and then you have to validate it. In my best friend's mind, and I don't want to say this as if her experience wasn't valid, because it is totally valid, but like from her perspective, she was being blamed. That is so upsetting. Having someone blame you for something that you didn't even do with like an ill intent or something that was just miscommunication, like that is not nice. I would hate to feel blamed. I would hate to be blamed. Like, I totally understand why that's upsetting. So just like putting myself in her shoes just for like a second, right? Not even an hour, just like a second, and thinking, how would I feel if that was me? How would I feel if I'm being blamed or someone is making me feel some type of way? Why wouldn't I want to acknowledge her experience and like validate how she feels? In order for you to validate someone's experience and acknowledge their experience, you have to understand. And that requires effort. Effort that you should be willing to give if this is a person that you love and care about. So let's say I acknowledge my best friend. I say, I completely understand how this text message made you feel like that. I completely understand where you're coming from. I'm so sorry that you feel blamed. That was not my intention whatsoever. Your feelings are valid. You know, like when you do all of those little things, you also need to explain yourself, but don't fall into the trap of trying to explain yourself to the point where you don't have to apologize. It is very important for you to explain your side, just as it is important for the other person to explain their side, because that way you're understanding their perspective, they are understanding your perspective, and the miscommunication becomes clear, because now it doesn't feel like it's you against the other person, but rather, okay, this is where like our perspectives weren't aligning. So now that we are aligning in like understanding where the miscommunication was, it is easier for us to like fix things and get on the same page, right? Oh my gosh. I hope this is like a cute metaphor or visualization. There's miscommunication, so both of you are on a different page. So then when one person explains their perspective, the other person is able to like read the pages that they missed, right? And then when this person explains their perspective, the other person can read the pages that they didn't read or go back on the pages to the point where they end up on the same page where they understand each other. That's what you're trying to do with the conversation, okay? The other person explains themselves and you explain yourself, and then you both validate each other. In this case, it would be like my best friend telling me like, I understand where you're coming from now, and I understand that you weren't trying to blame me. In the same way, like I don't want to be seen as a person who makes other people feel upset or who blames other people. And I also don't want to have the sensation that my best friend or whoever I'm talking with has a misconception of me. And that's why it's important for you to be validated in return. Because also when you are explaining yourself, even though let's say you weren't the one who was like upset over the whole situation, even just opening up, that's a risk, because you are putting yourself in a situation where the other person can misunderstand you or use your perspective against you and make you feel like the way that you saw things or the way that you carried yourself was wrong. So that in itself is a risk that you are taking So it does require validation from the other person to kind of like validate your experience, and almost as if saying thanks for making the effort of explaining yourself. These kind of conversations need to be handled with love, care, and effort. And it shouldn't be that hard because you should only be having these conversations with people that you love. You know, like, why wouldn't I make the effort of validating my best friend if I didn't love her? Like, that makes no sense. Why would I even bother having the conversation? Before, I used to have like this intense fear of being misunderstood and this intense fear of being disliked, to the point where like I would try to have this kind of conversation with everybody, and not everybody was as willing to have that conversation with me or be as receptive to my experience as I was to their experience. So I would end up forcing conversations, I would end up over explaining myself, not really getting anywhere, and just feeling emotionally drained just because I was doing too much. And now, if I know for a fact that you won't try to have a conversation in an adult, emotionally intelligent way, I'm not even gonna bother. If I feel like you're too childish, if I feel like you won't consider my feelings, if I feel like you won't acknowledge or validate my experience, I won't even bother having that conversation with you, because then I'm just wasting my time. If you're not willing to understand me, let me remain misunderstood. If you're not willing to acknowledge me, let me remain not acknowledged. If you are not willing to validate me, let me remain invalidated by you, because at the end of the day, if you're not willing to do that for me, then I need to redirect my energy to people who would do that for me. Starting for myself, like, I will definitely acknowledge my experience. I will definitely call myself out for the things that weren't right or for the things that could have been misinterpreted, I guess. But I will also validate my experience, because after having so many conversations like that, I truly need to validate myself, right? And I also think that's a very important aspect of having these conversations as well, would be acknowledging and validating your own experience, just in case the other person doesn't. But also, if you don't acknowledge or validate your own experience, it'll be very hard for you to take up space in that conversation and feel comfortable about it. Or you will end up over validating someone, expecting them to validate you, or you won't even feel like you even want to have that conversation because you feel like your emotions are not valid. Everyone's emotions are valid. Like, I need you to understand that, because everybody has a different perspective. So acknowledge yourself, validate yourself, and then acknowledge and validate other people, because when you don't do that for yourself, you end up expecting that from other people, which can drag the conversation or become like emotionally exhausting for the other person. I feel like I got sidetracked, but anyway. You should have these conversations with both love and care, because these are conversations that you're having with someone that you love and you care. You need to approach this from a place of love and not ego. It is truly a space where you can get close with the person that you love, not only based on how you fix the issue, but also making sure that this person feels loved and safe when they open up to you. That's how you get close with someone. So for example, let's say you became angry with your partner and the way that you expressed yourself wasn't really nice to your partner. In that specific situation, you could even say, how would you want me to express my feelings so that this doesn't happen again? How can I express to you that I feel angry in a way where you still feel respected? That in itself just gives you a better understanding of your partner, what they don't like, what confuses them, what upsets them. And then when they open up to you and they feel acknowledged and validated, they feel like, okay, it is safe to open up to this person. So I know that if I have a problem, I can open up to them again. If your partner doesn't feel safe with you and they stop opening up to you, your friendship, your relationship, your whatever dynamic you have with this person won't progress, won't grow, and that will be the end of it, or the beginning of the end. Your partner needs to feel comfortable and safe with you, especially when we're talking about emotions and becoming vulnerable. It takes so much courage to open up. It takes so much courage to express to someone. Just anything that you made someone feel like just them opening up is like, wow. Let me just acknowledge the courage that it took for you to open up to me, and let me just thank you for opening up to me. And you know, that's exactly how my conversation with my best friend went. It was pretty much like, I appreciate you so much for opening up. I appreciate you so much for sending a voice note and clearing things out. I appreciate you so much for being so understanding. Like, literally, I felt like I was in love. I felt like the friendship was stronger. I felt like I had a better understanding of who I was friends with. I had a better understanding of her character, and I really liked it. I was like, I feel safe talking with her. Like, I know that if I have an issue or if I have a problem, I can bring it up to her and she will listen to me. She will validate me. She will thank me for opening up and we will find the solution together. Isn't that nice? And I kid you not, it was like 3 or 4 days later, I was like, I love being friends with you. Like it truly just made me feel so happy and so blessed. And that is the kind of reactions you can have after having those conversations. It doesn't have to be resentment. It doesn't have to be anger. It doesn't have to be 3 more conversations just so you can fix and clear out the first one, you know? It can literally be feeling closer to each other, feeling so much love, feeling so much safety, and feeling so much reassurance over the decision of being friends or dating this person, you know? Now, in this video, I was focusing very much on how you should be with the other person. So I don't know if any of you were like, okay, but if I acknowledge them and if I validate them and if I thank them for opening up, what if they don't do the same for me? Or what can I do so that they can do the same for me? Baby, you shouldn't be doing anything for them to do that. It's going to be so hard for you to be friends with someone who doesn't already do that, because then you have to teach them and it's really hard for them to learn something they don't want to learn. So the reason why I'm not really adding anything to this video over how to make other people acknowledge you or validate you is because there's a lot of emotional intelligence that is required to acknowledge someone's experience and validate their feelings. And not everyone can have that. It's so hard to teach emotional intelligence, and that is not your job in a friendship or in a relationship. So the reason why I'm focusing on what you should do to your partner is because as that is your priority, how you should treat your partner with love in having this conversation, it is your partner's priority to think, how can I treat my partner with love in this conversation? So you focus on how you carry yourself this conversation for the both of you, and the other person should equally focus on how they will carry the conversation for both of you. So if both of you are thinking of acknowledging each other's experience and validating each other and just making it a safe space for each other, that's all you need. You don't have to think for them and for you. You don't have to do the extra effort for them and for you because they won't do it for you. You should be with someone who will do the effort for you as you are doing it for them. So if you're with someone who doesn't acknowledge you and doesn't validate you and doesn't want to make the effort, maybe you shouldn't be with that person. If you're literally watching this video in order for you to be better in having those conversations and just kind of like reduce the friction with your partner, I don't know, maybe you should consider having a partner who would do the same for you, who would watch the same kind of videos for you. Share my video, tell them to like. Obviously kidding, guys. But like, if I was putting so much effort into making this a safe space for my partner, I would personally want my partner to put as much effort as I'm putting, or as much effort as they need from their end to make this a safe space for me, right? So if you're with someone who's not, I would probably rethink, should I be with that person? In order for these conversations to work, they need to be collaborative, and it can't really be collaborative if it's just you. Don't know what else I can add to this video. I can give you some tips of mine when I have these conversations because, as I said, I love having these conversations. I use a lot of I feel statements. So I'd be like, I feel upset because when this comment was said, did you hear that? When this comment was said, instead of when you said that comment. That being said, I'm not perfect at doing this. Like sometimes I do say like, well, you said this. I feel like that just naturally increases the other person's anxiety. Confrontation is like already hard enough. If I'm saying you did that and you said that, I don't know, if it was me, I would be like, I don't think I want to be part of this conversation. I would feel like it's not a safe space to make mistakes, because at the end of the day, these conversations will keep happening, not because the other person is incompatible with you, but because you're humans. What do you mean I'm supposed to be perfect and never make a mistake just so that you're comfortable enough to never have a conversation like that with me? That makes no sense. I will make mistakes. I will say the wrong thing. I will say something that will end up being misinterpreted. I will say something that wasn't clear enough. I will say something and I won't have the right words for it. I will do the wrong thing once, twice, maybe 3 times, not intentionally, but because maybe at first I didn't know it was a wrong thing, or maybe I wasn't even aware that I was doing it, you know? Like, we are humans. The requirement for us to be friends with each other or for us to date each other shouldn't be for us to be perfect and never make a mistake and never say the wrong thing. I think the standard should be making sure the other person is understanding and compassionate when we make a mistake. And if the other person is compassionate with us and we are compassionate with them, you guys will have a better chance of forming a really strong bond compared to the people that are expecting each other to be perfect and have low compassion and low tolerance for humans being human. So make sure you say like I feel. When you lead the conversation with I feel like this and I feel like this happened and I feel whatever, that's what it is. It's a conversation. When you go like you did that and you did that because you were bad. Because you're a bad person, or you did that because you don't care about me, and you did that because whatever. Like that is so much different than I felt like you didn't care about me in that moment and it made me very upset. That's how you can turn a confrontation to a conversation, making it personal and making it a safe space for the other person to like own up to what they did. There's gonna be a better chance for me to like acknowledge what I did and take accountability if you tell me how you feel compared to you did this wrong and you're a bad person because of it and you should never be friends with someone because you did that. And I would also say take time to understand how you feel and why you feel that way. A lot of the times I would start those conversations because I felt anxious about something, when in reality my anxiety came more from like me having anxious tendencies rather than the other person doing something to make me feel that way, right? So if I had taken the time to kind of like self observe and just have like a better understanding of where I'm coming from, I would probably not have all of the conversations that I had. Maybe I would just have half, because I know that, okay, this is a conversation I should have with myself because why did I have that reaction, instead of with the other person because why did I have that reaction. So take time to understand why you feel the way that you feel and what's the resolution that you would like, but also take time to calm down. When you are in the heat of the moment, the conversation can just become messy. Even if that's not either's intention, it can become very messy just because both of you are like very emotional at that moment. So take time to gather yourself and blow some steam before coming together and having that conversation, because that's not a conversation that should be rushed. I feel like being loving towards your partner and like taking care of each other requires you to also give yourself the time you need to have that conversation. And you deserve the time. I feel like you deserve the time and the space to open up, to talk about how you feel, to listen to your partner and ask each other, how can we grow from this? What can I do? What can we do? What can you do for us to feel closer to each other, for us to avoid any problems like this in the future? Or even if they are not unavoidable, how can we make it more comfortable for us to have this conversation? Because they do tend to be a little bit uncomfortable. So the more willing you're to compromise, obviously without losing yourself, without disrespecting yourself, without putting someone above you, not willing to compromise that, but rather how can we meet each other in the middle with both love and respect for each other and for ourselves. And before I end the video, I would say having those conversations is so worth it. I feel like I've never regretted having a conversation like that when they end up like being resolved. If I'm able to like find a solution with my friend or my partner, I'm just so happy that I had that conversation. I always feel like I'm closer with them. I also feel like I have a better understanding of myself and how I react to certain things and how I tend to interpret it. They're not negative conversations and we shouldn't treat them as such. They're bound to happen. They can happen with people that we love in a loving way that allows us to have a better understanding of each other, of ourselves, and grow the love and the respect deeper. And I don't know about you guys, but personally, that sounds 10 times better than winning an argument. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. Sending much love to my best friend who I know was listening. Shout out to her in our conversation because it inspired my journal entry, my episode, and it made us get closer with each other. Also, I haven't posted in like 2-3 weeks. I feel like I just want to record, I want to post an episode, I want to edit. First week it was my graduation, so I was very busy with graduating, and if you haven't graduated then you wouldn't understand. But also my mom came to visit me, so like I was spending much needed family time. Second week I started a new job. Also last week was 1 year of the podcast, so yeah. And obviously I did like a little celebration. I got a cake. It was really cute. I didn't do the logo. I custom ordered the logo. That's like me being a diva. I love pink hair. I hope you guys still like my brown hair. And that's just me, like, living life. And this is a cake. And this is me being like so funny, taking out my crown and my wig. Before I leave, let me show you my nails. Can you guess where I'm going? Can you guess? I'm going to the Lux concert. Ah, I'm going to the Rosalia Lux concert. I'm so excited. I believe by the time I post this video, I would have already gone to the concert. So I will be talking about it either on Instagram or in the next video. Anyway, bye.